So hello guys, and welcome to another discussion video. And over the past few years, Nintendo has been adding new systems to Nintendo Switch Online. Like in 2018, we got NES, 2019, we got SNES, 2021, we got Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis, and then most recently, this year, we got Game Boy and Game Boy Advance. So, you might think that Nintendo is done adding new systems to Nintendo Switch Online, but I feel like they could go farther with it. Like, despite my problems with Nintendo Switch Online, there is a decent variety of systems and games available now. Like, my problems is that there still tends to be, like, a drip feed with adding games, and I feel like it took way too long to add the amount of systems that there are now, because it took like half the time it did on on the Wii U. It took like half the time to get all the systems and games that we have now. So yeah, and my other problem with it is that you don't get to keep the games. It's a subscription service, so it's kind of unfortunate these games aren't truly preserved. I mean, it's good that we can play them, but it's kind of unfortunate that it's like a service that you only have for a year and then you have to pay for it again. It seems like it's eventually going to be kind of abandoned or lost at some point. So yeah, but I feel like adding DS games is the next logical step. Like, I feel like that's kind of the next system in line with this. Like, we have all of the Nintendo handhelds up to that, and after the Nintendo 64, the GameCube doesn't really seem likely for Nintendo Switch Online, as well as the Wii, because both of those systems are getting remakes and remasters on the Switch. Like, with the GameCube, we got Metroid Prime Remastered, and then Baten Kaitos, that's coming this summer, I believe. So, and then there's also like the rumors of the rest of the Metroid Prime games, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, as well as F-Zero GX. And then on the Wii side of things, we have Skyward Sword HD, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, and then Kirby Return to Dreamland Deluxe. So it seems like the Wii and GameCube are mostly covered by separate re-releases. And unfortunately, with the GameCube side of things, I wish they would have done a more Virtual Console-esque approach to it, where they kind of release the games with minimal changes for like $15 to $20 on the eShop, or maybe even kind of connected it to Nintendo Switch Online a little bit, where it has online support, and you get to access it for free while you're subscribed to Nintendo Switch Online. But yeah, I feel like if they did something like that, more games would be available. Like, with the thing they're doing now with GameCube games, or what they're potentially doing, is likely going to leave out a lot of notable GameCube games. It's mostly going to be only a few select games. That's why I feel like it would have been better if they did, like, an approach where they kind of released more of them on the eShop. But yeah, kind of unfortunate with that, but the next system logically in line here with Switch Online is DS. And at first, DS doesn't really sound like it could work, because one, it has two screens, some games require a mic, and also the touchscreen as well, which is only used like in handheld mode on the Switch. But I feel like they could adapt it in some ways for it to work on the Switch. I mean, even though the options might be a bit odd, I feel like they could get it working in some form. I feel like handheld mode would be less of a problem. You could get really most of the games to work in handheld mode. But in docked mode, there are a few things that they could do. And just in general, with the controls, I feel like a flip grip like accessory would be cool to see, like with handheld mode, because the flip grip is already like a third-party accessory that exists, and it actually works with some Switch games. So I think it would be interesting to see like an official version of that kind of release alongside the DS and everything. Then also like an accessory for like something that could possibly work in docked mode. Like, one option they could possibly do to get the touchscreen portion of the DS to work in docked mode is the gyro pointer So I know that might be a bit weird, but it actually did work for Captain Toad Treasure Tracker as well as 3D World when adapting like the touchscreen elements of those games onto the Switch. So there is a possibility that they could do that. And they could also add something like mouse support, like either for like a wired mouse or a wireless mouse. I know like a wireless mouse wouldn't work through Bluetooth, but it could work through USB because the Nintendo Switch does support like mouse and everything because it works on Game Builder Garage and I believe like some other things as well. I'm not sure if it works with Nintendo Labo, but I do know for sure that it works with Game Builder Garage because I've used it before and it works pretty well. So I feel like they could actually add support for the mouse on there. They could even like release like their own version of like a mouse that works for the Nintendo Switch. I think that's a possibility. And then along with that, they could even add like Mario Paint on the SNES service to kind of go along with that. But yeah, I think that could possibly work because it does work on emulators if you're using like a mouse. You could use that for the touchscreen. And yeah, they could also do something like a touchpad like accessory for using the touchscreen in docked mode. They could maybe release that as like a My Nintendo store type thing, kind of like how they have the controllers, but like a touchscreen or like a touchpad type thing might be possible. I'm not sure how it would work exactly, but I think that would be kind of interesting to see that adapted. But yeah, there are a few different ways they could adapt the controls of the DS onto the Switch in docked mode and everything. So yeah, we'll just have to see if they end up actually adding DS games on Nintendo Switch Online. So with different options you'll have available in the app, I feel like they would allow for both download play and online functions. Like obviously like all of the other services have online support, but I feel like they could do online support in a couple different ways. Like kind of have the download play have like support for online in a similar way to how the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games work with the link cable, because download play is fairly similar to how the link cable works, like with how the systems connect and everything. And I guess it's also pretty similar to local play on the Switch in general, but just having that on Nintendo Switch Online with like online support and everything, I feel like that could definitely work, like both with local and online for download play. And it would be really cool to see like an actual online server for some of the games with online support, because the DS was the first Nintendo console with full online support. I know the GameCube technically had a few games with online, but the DS kind of fully embraced it. Like it had it like with a lot of the games and everything, especially like Mario Kart DS and different things like that. But it would be cool to see like online support for some of the online functions in DS games. I'm not sure how far Nintendo would go with it, maybe like friends only, or they might open it up to like playing with random people, but I think it would be cool if Nintendo kind of reopened the online modes for some of these DS games if they added them to Nintendo Switch Online. And I feel like some games would also only support handheld mode. Like, as much as some of the options that I mentioned earlier might work for some touchscreen functions, I feel like there are just some games that would really only work with a touchscreen. So I feel like there would be some games that would only have handheld support. Like, there could be a thing where there's docked plus handheld, which would, like, they could have, like, little icons with each of the games. Like, one would be docked plus handheld, and then ones that are recommended to use handheld, but could also function in the dock if you use, like, proper methods. And then handheld only options as different things. So yeah, I feel like they could do different icons for that. And then also like adapt the controls for games that are heavily centered around the touchscreen. Like make them so they could work slightly better in docked mode and everything. But yeah. And then also the screen display options, kind of like how they had on the Wii U. Like if you wanted to like a top screen and bottom screen, though that might be low resolution on the handheld mode. They could possibly do that, or do one that would work in like the flip grip like accessory, and then have the screen side by side for one of the options. I feel like they could possibly do something like that, because the Wii U had a lot of options for different screen variations on the DS and everything. So yeah, those are some of the options I'd expect to see, like if they add like the DS on Nintendo Switch Online. I feel like there would be a lot of options available due to how flexible the DS was as a console. Like, with online modes, download play, screen variations, and everything. I feel like there's a lot that they could do there. But moving on, I kind of wanted to discuss some of the games we could expect to see on the DS library. So, with the launch lineup, I have New Super Mario Bros., which makes a lot of sense because that's one of the best-selling DS games, and it's just a very iconic game in general. It's one game that I really want to be re-released on the Switch and everything, or re-released on a modern console in general. I know it was on the Wii U, but I think it would be really cool to see it like on future consoles and everything, because I feel like it's really worth playing. One of my favorite 2D Mario games of all time, and yeah, I think it's just a really good game in general, and the Mario vs. Luigi mode is excellent, and I think it would be really cool to play Mario vs. Luigi online. I know there's technically that one fan game, but it would be cool to see like an official thing from Nintendo in terms of like that Mario vs. Luigi mode. And then there's also Mario Kart DS, which would definitely work very well online. Well, if the online isn't completely laggy, kind of how it is on Nintendo Switch Online. But yeah, pretty good game to kind of bundle as one of the launch games, since Mario Kart Super Circuit was bundled in as one of the launch titles with the Game Boy Advance on Nintendo Switch Online. So the next one is Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. So this one actually wasn't on the Wii U Virtual Console for DS. Partners in Time was, but I think it would be kind of fitting to have like at least one RPG in the launch lineup, since Paper Mario was added shortly after the Nintendo 64 online released, and then Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga was added to the Game Boy Advance library from the start. So I think it would be nice to see Bowser's Inside Story on there, and I feel like that one would realistically be added first, because it's like the most iconic one, and the one that most people are probably gonna remember. So I think they're like, because sometimes they do add the sequels before they add the previous games, kind of like how they did with Wario Land 3 on the Game Boy library, so they might just do something like that. And I think they also did that with Kirby's Dream Land 3 on the SNES library before Superstar, so it's possible that they'll add Bowser's Inside Story first. So the next one is Super Mario 64 DS, and I promise this is the last Mario game in the launch lineup. I know I mentioned several of them, but 64 DS, even though it's a remake of Mario 64, there's a lot of differences from the original game, like the fact that you could play as Yoshi, Luigi, and Wario, the extra stages, the mini-games. There's a lot of differences from the original game, like even different stars and levels and bosses. It's just a really good remake overall, and I think it would be cool if they actually added official, like, analog controls to the game. I think it would be unlikely if it wasn't, like, a standalone release, because Nintendo usually, with the NSO games, they kind of release them as is. So, yeah, I'm not sure, I think they're just gonna leave it, as the original controls were, which would be a little unfortunate, but it still is a great game regardless. I know it is kind of, conflicting for some people. A lot of people prefer the original version of Mario 64, but I personally prefer DS because of, all of the content that they added, and I might be a bit biased because that's the version that I grew up with. It was one of my first mainline Mario games, my first 3D Mario game. So, yeah, I really liked 64 DS. So another one is Animal Crossing Wild World. I think that could possibly work as well, especially due to the popularity of Animal Crossing New Horizons. Then another one is Metroid Prime Hunters. I'm not sure how much this one uses of the touchscreen, though I feel like they could adapt it to touch control, or not touch controls, but like regular button controls in some shape or form. So especially because of like the resurgence in Metroid games recently, I feel like it would kind of be fitting to add Metroid Prime Hunters on there. And then the final one is Tetris DS, and I kind of wanted to add this because usually like the NSO libraries add like one kind of extra game that isn't like as big as the others on there, and Tetris DS is pretty interesting because it actually has a lot of Nintendo themed modes on it, which is really cool and is definitely pretty underrated. So I think it would be cool if it was added onto there. So yeah, I feel like there's also several games that they could add later to the service. So Mario & Luigi Partners in Time, like I said with Bowser's Inside Story, I feel like that would definitely be added eventually to kind of coincide with that game. And then Mario Party DS, even though I assume there are some mini games that use touch controls. I haven't played the game in a while, but I feel like it could work because it isn't completely dependent on touch controls. And then the Advance Wars games would be nice to see with Advance Wars Dual Strike and Advance Wars Days of Ruin. They actually weren't a part of the recent collection, or kind of remake collection that released, like with 1+2 Reboot Camp. I'm not sure if that's why the Game Boy Advance, Advance Wars games aren't coming over to NSO. I assume that would be the case, though Link's Awakening is on the Game Boy line. Maybe they'll add the GBA Advance Wars games eventually, but I feel like the Advance Wars games on DS would realistically come to Nintendo Switch Online due to the fact that they don't have remakes. And then the next one is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of the Sky. I feel like at least that one would probably come first, because the other ones, or the other one on DS, the original one has a remake. I know that also had a Game Boy Advance release, but I'm not sure if that's holding it back from being on Nintendo Switch Online, or at least like the GBA version of that. And with Pokemon, it's kind of an interesting scenario because like it seems like they're not really adding the Pokemon games onto Nintendo Switch Online. They might eventually, though I would kind of update this list with the DS Pokemon games if they do end up adding Pokemon to the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance libraries. It's kind of unfortunate that they aren't, due to the fact that these games are like pretty expensive now. But I'm just kind of including that as like a Pokemon spin-off, because Pokemon spin-offs are definitely kind of able to be on there. So yeah. And the next ones are Kirby Squeak Squad and Kirby Superstar Ultra. Kirby Superstar Ultra is a remake of Superstar, but it does have a lot of changes and a lot of updates to the original game, so I think it's possible to see, since we do have the advanced games in Super Mario All-Stars on Nintendo Switch Online. So I do think it's possible. And Squeak Squad would be nice to see as well. And then the next ones are Super Princess Peach, another underrated game, Yoshi's Island DS, DK Jungle Climber, Wario Master of Disguise, and Mario Hoops 3-on-3. So yeah, those are some games that could be added, and then there's also a few more that could be added, but would be like touchscreen only games, like handheld only games. And I had those as Rhythm Heaven DS. I think that's possible since that's a pretty iconic game, and there isn't really any like Rhythm Heaven alternative on the Switch. There might be like some indie alternative, or like some non-Nintendo game, but like there aren't really any ways of playing Rhythm Heaven on the Switch. I hope they put the original from GBA on the GBA library, because like I'm not sure if that requires a translation or not, but that would be cool to see on the GBA library. But Rhythm Heaven DS would definitely be fitting to see on there, but yeah. And then also Mario vs. Donkey Kong 2 March of the Minis. That would be another one that would be handheld only. Then Brain Age or Brain Age 2. And then the Zelda games with Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks would also be nice to see. But yeah, those are some of the handheld only games. But yeah, those are some of the ideas that I have for DS on Nintendo Switch Online. I feel pretty nostalgic for the DS, so it would be kind of disappointing if it wasn't added onto the Switch, despite the fact that it would probably be hard to translate it onto the Switch. So I do think there are ways of putting it onto the Switch, and I really hope they do at some point. So anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and make sure to check out my Discord server if you want to. Goodbye.